And hi and welcome to the SUSE QE Tools workshop. Today, little change here. Different room, but the rest is unchanged. This is Friday of an even month. So we changed the schedule a little bit, which is also impacting the roadmap discussions. But this one is still following up the last one, which we did just 1 month ago. Just the next one will be in 2 months from now, because I decided that it's fine if we only do a meeting every second week and then only a roadmap per second month. But for now, for August, we can present what we did the last month, and actually we did do a lot. So let's go into it. For this, first let's start with the closed within the last days. I will change that to roughly 32 days. And then we can have an overview of how we worked. I will group that by let's see, by project. Yep. So what we have is 79 tickets, which is meeting our expectation of above the average. So we are still, let's say, before full vacation period here. And we can see that there were 32 tickets worked on in infrastructure project, 35 in the OpenKey project itself, 2 related to test, 6 generic tasks, and 4 SUSE internal ones. About the infrastructure, what we had there is actually multiple which show up here as high, but I would say most of them, well, all of them were not that big issues. We just realized that after we found a problem in email sending. So we realized that in some cases we didn't didn't receive a notification if something went wrong. Or we fixed that email sending, and after that we could see some issues, some minor issues, but also big issues, which was that there was a corrupted needles repo, which was actually found after we looked into, can we make tests that are triggered clone tests and needles automatically based on the new test parameters that we put in. And then we found that actually the one repository for production, which is already there, having a problem. That was good to find it. What else? Yeah, you can see some alert reaction tickets. We also did one lesson learned about the that we had at one point many alerts and maybe too many alerts, and I guess anybody working with incident response quickly knows about how to handle those. Can become an important part, especially if you're working in a bigger team. Then it's really important to understand who will work on something. Is something already looked on? How can we ensure that nothing is overlooked and that we are not suffering from alert fatigue? So that's why I asked to conduct that lesson learned, which was really nice and helpful, and we came up with some improvements. There are also only minor ones. Sorry about it. And we extended our alert handling process we have on our public, and you can follow. There are also some research tasks that we wanted to do, which we also found on another lessons learned which we did in this period. That CD. The proxy response alert. Yeah, we did have a bigger HTTP response outage problem again, or not outage, or like really bad responsiveness. You can also see that in graphs here. No, actually, sorry, that's results of experiments. So we did see an initial unresponsiveness, so something where in this graph you would see windows when there's no response at all. And we identified multiple points that could lead to that. One is that we're running a database backup at certain times. Plus, we have the database backup combined with fstrim, where trimming on the file system is called, so that 3 devices on the storage device are actually freed. Plus, certain factors of how the system behaves and all of that coinciding can lead to problems. If, and this is a result of an experiment that I did, if I'm just producing heavy load, as in like, pretending there are multiple hundreds of users accessing our system that is OpenSUSE QE at the same time, you can see the effect over this time window, plus running the database backup during that time. Then we see that there is elevated load, and we can see that the HTTP response is slightly elevated as well, but it's not an outage, okay? So that's still normal operation. So just those two things coming together is not enough to make it unresponsive, and only when it's combined with one of the other factors we mentioned, then the problem can be so that external systems or external users. So we found that problem. We found multiple problems. We improved the code. We found multiple follow-up tasks. We also defined here, for example, you can see out of scope task is when we say like, okay, we find something during our investigation, but we cannot fix all, or the person working on that cannot fix all at the same time. So we say sometimes explicitly, yeah, okay, don't even try to fix that because it's already handled outside. And one initial problem was that if there are too many browsers on the live view page, then there are not anymore idle workers able to work on requests to just show the index page or job details page or anything like that, and this can stall. Then other minor issues is that there were jobs ending with timestamp mismatch when actually there was not a problem with the time on the workers in the web UI at all. So that's what we wanted to handle. So we reversed the timestamp handling a little bit and also looked into the error message. And then there were also jobs failing with API failures, but it just said API failure and no more details. So you wouldn't know enough details to know like, okay, so what should I do now as a test reviewer, right? That's actually still an open task, but we have to find that. As a follow-up to that ticket, then we also conducted the lessons learned with a 5-why analysis, and the results here. So what we can say, what happened is that OSD was unresponsive before our start of business day, but also over the day of the 10th of July. Multiple persons looked into the problem soon after reporting the issue, so that was a good thing from teamwork perspective, and because we're always looking at where can we improve also as a team working on that. After identifying one underlying problem, which was related to the live view handling, a fix was prepared and also mitigation was put in place by disabling the live view and disabling the order update. Even though that's turned out to be not related, but that's completely fine. Also, OSD deployment was disabled. So those were all mitigations that were put into place while people were working on a fix and making sure that proper fix can be deployed. And then we looked into multiple things like why was OSD not responding in time to HTTP requests, and also going further, we even identified multiple more questions related to the incident which go beyond the 5 whys for the initial incident. And you can see always those ticket references showing the new tasks that we identified that we could plan to work on. In reality, there might be some tasks which we will effectively never work on, but that's completely fine, because at the point of the time we do a brainstorming and we say like, okay, this is something that could be improved, that's something that we want to improve, the really important things we actually do. But there can always be some things which are actually valid ideas, but never find a place on our backlog for various reasons. And with that, we concluded the mitigation of that issue, which is also related to web proxy response alert. And you can see here, this is one of the related follow-up tickets. There was also a problem within the SUSE IT managed storage, which was affecting us. So during that time, we also had an outage. But actually, the good thing about infrastructure that we run, that we needed nearly no manual handling was necessary to bring the system back. It was basically like, okay, OpenK is like down and unresponsive, but as soon as the storage was back up and the virtual machines were back up, jobs were just fine. It was just that many OpenK tests couldn't access, like they were starting and they failed trying to access internal repositories which are not available. But this is, I would say, more an issue in the design of the tests, in particular the sleeve maintenance tests, how they are designed, because the product validation tests for like a new build of Sleeve 7 would not be affected. Okay, so much about the infrastructure. Let's take a look at the project. So what we see here is so let's see which one is interesting. Prevent live viewers from making OpenGL unresponsive. So that's the one fix which I mentioned. I would like to quickly highlight that one. So that was involving multiple pull requests. This one says as well, right? So it was already a follow-up for the initial issue which was identified, I guess, and this one here. Right, prevent live viewers from making OpenGL unresponsive. So that was the really important fix. When too many people were on the live view, then other able to be processed anymore, depending on the configuration of how many workers are actually configured. So the changes within this pull request, which is some in the JavaScript code related to the live view, so when you actually look at jobs while they are being executed, showing you a live screenshot in the video, by moving the according code from the web API to a shared module, and then the live view handler is actually a separate service that's running, and that is now handling those additional requests as well. So we see that the streaming route is removed from web IP and it's moved to the live view handler. And after that, we identified other points where we say like, yeah, okay, maybe a similar solution could be applied there as well, and that could be streamlined, and that helps code clarity, but also performance here. So then we also did a time box about let OpenK keep test distribution checkouts up to date without needing patch needles, which is important precursor to actually finish up the current saga, which is in work, the full version control awareness. So I wanted to have identified where we are still missing some points, where with the current approach of running fetch needles, which is kind of like a separate process being called by one job to keep Git repositories up to date, is doing something that should be done by OpenK internally with a Git checkout within OpenK. And Tina did great work here to identify that. And we, for example, came up with proposals to that would just use the same minion guard for all Git related minion tasks and use a recording code for all our wrappers. Ensure that we have an according cleanup, and then finally also replace with the minion job itself. So those are tasks which are then in our backlog or closely to be followed after that, which should be worked on the next. And there was a request regarding enablement of new tests, which needs specific new options to be supplied to a virtual job. And you might remember that in one of the previous workshop sessions, I looked with you guys into trying to code a certain feature. So that's why I actually managed to come up with that pull request myself in this in the follow up of that nice co-working yet in the tools workshop, ending up with the change to support to configure sector sizes for HID images, and that one is doing its job nicely. So I understood that it was a verified connection. Let's see. Yeah, there were problems when you had like a tumbleweed system and you had an earlier version of FFmpeg and you're upgrading that system over time, and that FFmpeg version is not fully compatible with the AV1 encoding that we select as default depending on the FFmpeg. So that was fixed. And so if you have a tumbleweed system where you still have an older FFmpeg version installed, then this should fall back to the right encoder here. Let's see. Yeah, we did change now to enable the Git cloning by default. So that means if you set up a new OpenGL instance, then it's actually doing magic in the background to check out and update Git repositories which are initially checked out with the internal Git support. So if a case there is actually pointing to a Git repository, then this is done also for. Let's see. So that one was an older epic to support needles from Git clone to separate repos if case there points to Git repo. Let me check what we did here. Is we did manage to cross off all the subtasks, and you can see that there are two by the number there are two more recent tickets because it was taking such a long time until we could take a look into that epic again. We actually came up with a specific time box task, a research task to understand the current behavior of test systems, including needles, because we want to make sure that our assumptions and the documentation is actually still up to date. So we cross-checked that. Maybe we found one minor point for improvement or something, but actually that helped us to say like, yeah, okay, all of that is actually already resolved, and now we could finish up all those tasks and there this right. And a recent minor feature is add support for under priority setting and single jobs. So what you can do now, you create jobs, put the priority value there to so that jobs that are kind of created manually or via OpenGL clone job also can take a scheduling priority. There was a prio value in before, and so that was a bit like inconsistently handled among the different ways of how to trigger jobs. You could do it like over a product setting or over a individual job. So with this priority it's now streamlined. This concludes the OpenGate section. In OpenGate tests, there were multiple issues during download on download.openSUSE.org, and we actually still have issues like those. Here we fix that with kind of even more retries, which kind of hides the problems for us. In another case where there is a ticket still open, we actually managed to use the OpenGate in OpenGate tests to gather more zipper verbose logs, upload them, and then I did provide those information to the maintainers of OBS, zipper plus the mirror service. And those guys looked at it together and then identified where the problem is. So that was, I would say, a really good collaboration effort, ending in not a fix yet, but now we have some handle, or the expert in the domain have some handle to improve the situation. So hopefully then probably the mirror infrastructure will improve here, how to prevent something like that in the future, which is not only affecting OpenGate, but basically any handling of zipper, especially if you're using extra development repositories. It's just that we see that much more often because we have Devil OpenGate changing a lot, because we have very often new package versions in there. But also we use it a lot in OpenGate and OpenGate that we use that repository. That's why we see that combination of okay, the repository had just been changed on OBS, and now we try to call zipper ref from an OpenGate and OpenGate, and then that fails. So that's the two factors needing to come together. There's another OpenGate and OpenGate test failure which I wanted to show. So that one was in the tumbleweeds test, where we also run OpenGate and OpenGate test. So they're part of a tumbleweed snapshot, in this case 2024-0803, and that snapshot then had failed tests. So Dimstar pointed out that problem to us, and if you take a look at next and previous results, we can see, that in that snapshot it was still fine, and then problems started up and they were reproducing in that build and also in the next build. And also, let me just take a look at the very first failure. We can see from the OpenGate Investigate jobs, and this is what Dimstar pointed out. He said he was replicating just a message from OpenGate Investigate, and OpenGate Investigate was spot on. It said it's likely a product issue. Why? Well, we can retry and the issue fails. If we go back to the last build, it works. And also there are no test regressions expected because there were no changes in the test which are relevant here. So that shouldn't matter. And that it says still likely, because if it's a sporadic issue, then it could actually happen that you have this unfortunate combination of results which make it look like it would be a product regression, but actually isn't. That one you could only find out if you retrigger multiple more times and then have some trustable statistics. But as we can already see afterwards, we see yeah, okay, actually the issue seems very much reproduced. The actual issue was, if you take a look here, that we are on the login page. Well, an uneducated OpenGate reviewer I think yeah, that's what people say, yeah, okay, it's just a needle issue, right? Because I want to find in logged in as demo and I find this. So let's use call the needle editor and draw a rectangle about that, which would be really wrong, because it's not expected to show the login window at all. it is really expected that we are already logged in at that case. And why is that? Because if we take a look at the full view here, that's how it's expected to look like, where you have logged in as demo. Why? Because in that we expected that the system would be configured for fake authentication. So where's the product issue? Well, the product being OpenQA in that case, which we also submit to Tumbleweed. The problem that we did is in let's take a look at the fix. The problem that happened is that by mistake in an earlier commit we removed that line. Why? Because that line had one config replacement statement and another one, and we only wanted to remove the second one, and by mistake the complete line was removed, and also I overlooked that as reviewer. So that's what caused the issue. And we actually found one more problem related to that, because then, as can happen sometimes, we provided a fix, but then our CI tests failed because they were working on the former Tumbleweed build, which had the bug, so we couldn't have that pull request merged merge automatically. We would need to manually force a merge. But then on the next step, it would continue that the OpenQA and OpenQA tests were using not the fixed version, but the old version. So that wouldn't have helped. So yeah, we also provided a fix accordingly in the OpenQA and OpenQA test. So, and then let's take a look into QA. What we wanted to do is we wanted to feature podcasts and recording on open and .qa. So we have, if you take a look here on OpenQA documentation, there are multiple guides, there are multiple videos, and then blogs and external resources shows now multiple things more. For example, there's a QE testing monthly call. There was one just yesterday evening, unfortunately I just missed that. And then there's also a recent podcast recording. So if you're interested listening to a podcast about OpenQA, then I invite you to listen to that. Don't do it now. Do it later after the workshop is done. And then what else? Then I would like to show work on QM dashboard. So our fellow recently joined colleague Rob, hi Rob, did a great work here, and I think we have a screenshot highlighting that. Oh yeah. So we have the dashboard, and the dashboard and before already sorted the incidents by priority, but there are certain thresholds in priority, and something about 650 for a maintenance incident means like, okay, this is becoming super important now, and you should consider manual review and really like working together to bring that out of the door really quickly. So this is how it would look like in new versions, where you would have a yellow striped background, plus that small, plus a bold print and a little triangle. And if you hover over the triangle, then it would give you an explanation for that. So that was great work. And after that, I actually also managed to provide a small fix by myself, because I found like, hey, I can't see the change myself. And that happens to be a problem in how we try to use nested CSS, but that's unfortunately not yet fully supported in the Firefox version ESR, which I'm using here from OpenSUSE Deep. So minor fix that we did is to just provide all the CSS structures on the top level directly. Yep, so that concludes the resolved tasks that we did. Overall, I think still great support, even though some people were already in vacation. That didn't impact our velocity so far. Probably it will impact a little bit going forward for the next 2 months, but that will be fine. So let's take a look at the current plan. We have on the top level view, we have the lower one, full version control awareness within OpenGA. I already mentioned that we identified some tasks related to keeping needle repositories up to date that I would still like to clean up with. Then we will actually bump the version of also this OpenGA to a new major version after that. And then we will have the Saga and the OpenGA for SUSE customers, which is the second saga that we have here. For that one, actually, we can take a look. The open task that we have currently identified is that we want to make the documentation and the instructions a bit simpler for newcomers to start with. And we want to use the opportunity to do a proper benchmarking and profiling of certain pages and see where we have improvement points. But we also have some tasks that we still need to do. For example, here to make sure that we have all the dependencies in the according repositories which are available to customers, not only in PackageHub but also in the related to this here, but then also or those two which is on a bit related to have all OpenGA also in its plus dependency in SLE plus PackageHub, have them updated like once manually, have them also updated automatically, and then after that actually have the according dependencies updates in pure SLE after that. For that there are already some submit requests which are open and are pending, and now is a good time because SLE 15 SP7 development has started within the, and then we can submit those packages soon. After that, then we will have room for the next saga to pick up. But in the meantime, we are still also working on reactive work as well as on some preparation work for sagas as well, because sometimes there are, certain dependencies, as I just mentioned before. So like, okay, we already have some submit requests. It doesn't make sense to push more work in direction for that saga. And we would rather wait for those first. So that's fine. In the meantime, what we planned is on Leaf 15.6, I found when I upgraded one machine as an experiment that S390 tests cannot work with the current configuration that is used. So there was a message about unsupported configuration and machine type. It does not support ACPI, which is correct for S390. It just means that we need to adjust also orderings to account for that. Maybe it's as simple as not adding ACPI parameters when starting S390 QEMU jobs. But we will have to see how much that one is then backward compatible or if there's certain tests relying on that. Yeah, we have also related to the upgrade from Leaf 15.5, 15.6. I'm also saying like, okay, we should also make sure that the PostgreSQL database is up to date or is using at best the current new default version of Postgres on certain servers. We have that planned for the OpenGA instances that we maintain, but also we have other instances like QM SUSE, which is running the QM dashboard to do that. Some problem on O3, which was also just showing up now because we fixed some cases where we didn't receive email notifications. So that's now fixed. And then I mentioned updating dependencies in SLE. There was also one issue where we had a problem which only showed up after deploying a new change of OpenGA on OpenGA OpenSUSE.org. And I'm feeling like, okay, we should try to make sure that AppArmor is enforced in the OpenGA and OpenGA test, because that's what OpenGA is good for, to really simulate full operating systems. To be able to do that, that might prevent such errors to slip through. Next, to benchmarking and profiling pages, I also want to use the chance to evaluate if something like HTMX can simplify and reduce what we have defined as procedural JavaScript code, jQuery leftovers, etc. It's basically just like okay, we know our stack and some parts of the stack become old. We can consider alternatives. And in many cases, we will consider alternatives and say like they are not suitable for certain reasons. But I would like to make that an explicit choice to know why we are not following a certain. So that's why it's also a time box task, and we select not we need to push through with that to have our system changed, but really to just see, does it make sense to do that, but give it a proper thought. Similar to that, evaluate the use of state-of-the-art web development framework like Alpine JS, CSS nesting, which I just mentioning before, made might actually caused a little problem for us. Right. What else? Yeah, there is currently, if you are a new OpenGA user, then you will be greeted by a simple tour, and that tour is problematic regarding dependencies that it uses. So we can consider to replace that tour with simple bootstrap hints pointing to first steps, which is hopefully then also less intrusive, because I understand that some people sometimes they don't find the button to actually disable the tour. Maybe we need to make that more visible, or in some cases when you're actually working multiple times with and over again, we're a bit annoyed by that. So we will see how we can handle that. Let's see, there is some work going on, especially by Tinita here, to in the maintainership of double languages Perl on OBS, which is not directly related to the development work that we do, but the part of the team, she's a maintainer of that project, and there's some maintenance work that needs to be done. So I also appreciate if we can make that work more explicit. Now, related to one of those lessons learned meeting that we did about too many alerts or unable to handle that and such, we identified this one point which we want to do, and I'm interested in the outcome of that. Discuss the benefits versus the drawbacks about applying mitigations if there is an incident as early as possible versus keeping system in broken state to ease investigation. Also do industry standards best practice with. So for example, if a system is not like completely down, but impacted in a significant way so that users can feel it. Let's say OpenGA is unresponsive or has really low responsiveness, but it works if I apply the workaround of waiting very long. Then maybe the developers have a better chance at actually identifying the root cause and fixing it if we keep the system as is and just take a deeper look. But of course, the users are impacted more. And there could be simple mitigations like try to restore all the servers, reduce the number of workers or reduce the number of jobs accessing the system, disable secondary maintenance services that are running in the background. And that can all help to mitigate until we identify the actual problem. However, it can also make the error vanish, as in not showing up without being fixed, and then we would not have a good handle to fix it. So that's why I would like us to do an actual research of how that should be, if there are any kind of best practices that we can follow in a decision guideline. Yeah, then there are some related to the internal Git checkout and Git updating feature of OpenGA that we can use in more places now to replace some old craft. And oh yeah, an interactive log viewer, general filtering. If you're interested in that, there is some pull requests, which has a nice video showing that in action. So let's see if we follow the demo. then you can see this is how the log viewer looks like in OpenGA for a log of a certain test. And you can filter the view as was requested by certain search terms, including a regex. So that's going to look quite neat, and I hope that it helps more people. And then also, yeah, want to be able to filter out groupless jobs. It says from API and UI, when working on it, we already identified one interesting point is that over the UI, it's actually already possible, but maybe it's not entirely obvious how to do that. And then over the API, it's actually was not possible yet. So, Rob, what's the state? Do we already have the help text for it? No, not yet. Okay. And then in feedback, what do we have here? Right, there was one.
Hear me, I hope.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not deployed yet, but should be soon. Or at least the API implementation is not deployed.
Yeah, sure. All right. There's one interesting change is that after such a long time, my wish was fulfilled, and now it's actually possible that an OpenGA instance, we do automatic deployments of OpenGA instances, and that showed the problem that during a very short time period, but still possible, that if you are if you as a human operator could observe that get a 502 HTTP response because the web UI was just restarting. And that was fixed now with well, basically with Linux socket reusing, and that's a great feature change now mostly by Marius, so that whenever the OpenGA web UI and other services restart, it's basically the server is just replaced by a new version instantly, so that the old connections are handled by the old web UI, and then the new one takes over without leaving a window for 502. So that's pretty great. And then I would like to mention those two things, which are bold because that's me being assigned to it. Let's first start with the first one, which is remove deprecated script run with die on timeout 0. That one was declared, that sub function was declared as deprecated already more than 3 years ago. We didn't follow up to obsolete that deprecated call yet, so I wanted to push that forward. Related to some people also asking me like, what's the correct way to do it and why is it marked as deprecated? So I provided pull request here for also Osado, and also other people did, which is great because now we can reconsider what's the proper way to handle the cases where that was used, or as some people would call it, abused in the past, and not need to rely on that behavior anymore. And then there was the HTTP response alert, which I mentioned, which had multiple reasons coming together. And one is that fstrim is called every Monday morning at 0100 ET time. And I was also conducting multiple experiments there. And first I was surprised because I could reproduce the problem running fstrim, and then changing some parameters, I could not reproduce the problem anymore. And it really seems like fstrim by itself, again, is not a problem. It's really just if you bring multiple things together, like running fstrim and pgdump at the same time, for example, is causing this to be unresponsive. So I'm looking at different things how to handle that. The thing is that this can just take very long because I'm to have a realistic test. I need OpenQA to write a lot of data so that fstrim is actually needing to do heavy work, because fstrim would then need to scrape the complete file systems and check what needs to be done. So I think it's a more realistic setup to, well, actually, I will just wait it out over multiple weeks if changes that I do actually have an effect. So I would need to wait multiple, I need to wait for multiple Mondays to pass. So that's it with the things which are planned and which are being worked on. That leaves it to you. So you guys, you have any questions or additions you would like to make? Doesn't seem like. That's perfectly fine. So let's just take a look. The next two instances will be skipped. So we have a longer window of no workshop session that is planned yet because there's some summer holiday period coming up. And on the 20th of September, we have an open slot yet. So if any of you guys have a suggestion, then please bring it forward and talk about that. Or we will pick a topic which is related to the work which will happen up to then, which is still those 5 weeks. Maybe we will see interesting feature coming up. Until then, thank you and see ya. Goodbye.